Welcome, everyone. Oh, I think we got some stuff going on. Yeah, I think we're going, Guillaume. And you're mute.
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps throwing me into the larger screen. You should be good.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I apologize again. We're a week off. I was noticing it the other day. I'm not quite sure how we ended up there, but we're here. I at least listened to a great book the other day while working out, and a couple times. I thought it would be had some great topics in it, even topics that we wanted to dive deeper into last time, like the talent hotbed a little bit and things like that. But it also covered many other subjects that pertain to really learning in general. So I thought, you know what, let's pull some people together and talk about these things. And hopefully it will give everyone a chance to, think about fighting a little more, because that's really actually one of the keys of learning. So we have Sir Barry today, Viscount Tristan once again, Duchess Antigone, His Majesty Simon, and Sir Guillaume here with us. And of course, me, Duke Bronis. Everybody's getting tired of seeing my face. So I'm probably going to be maybe in and out a little today, but we have a great crew of people. Guillaume, thanks for doing the producing for us. And I think we'll start by saying, the book is The Talent Hotbed. It's a book that actually I was kind of surprised I hadn't covered already, given all the other books I read, and I had heard the name of it many times. So finally I saw it, and I'm like, why didn't I get it and listen to it? And it's not a terribly long book. It's probably some people bitched about it being a little longer than it needed to in some of the areas, but it covers a lot of subjects. And
hey, Brown,
I thought, yes.
Is that the talent code or the talent hotbed?
Oh, talent code.
Just in case someone is looking it up right now.
This is why I need you on the show, brother.
That's exactly. That's what I'm good for. You're good at killing people. I'm good at remembering book titles.
I think what we'll do is we'll kind of jump. Let's start this way. Hey, Barry, since you talked first, obviously you've read this book before. You said, what did you come out of this book most? What parts grabbed you the biggest in this book?
Oh,
and my God! Ask everybody the same question, so keep it short.
Keep it short. All right. I'll pick one thing, because I'll say this. There's a lot to talk about the book, and it kind of covers a big picture, soup to nuts, broken down. What it says is basically how you practice, how do you foster like a good environment, and then kind of how do you how to master teachers do that. And there's a lot we could talk about. So I'll just pick one thing. One of the things they talked about. Simon's showing the book right now. One of the things they talked about in there is actually no. I'll give you the one that I like. It gave an example of a coach, John Wooden, who had, I think, 9 straight national basketball championships in the 70s with UCLA. He coached at the time Lou Alcindor, who became the great, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And the short version is they went to study. A bunch of people went to study how he was coaching, and what they were expecting were these big Shakespearean soliloquies that you would see, in the movies. Like you would have the dramatic music behind them and all these great things. And I kind of think that's where a lot of SCA teachers fail, is they make it too theatrical and too big and too much about showing their own knowledge and information. And they said when they went there, most of what he said was, stop, do it like this, not like that, like this, move on. Keeps it real short and simple and digestible. And I want to throw something out to a new coach that's joined the team. Has been a friend of mine for a long time, Count Randall out of Atlanta. And when you watch his short videos, I think he embodies almost exactly that. He takes a student and says, you're not throwing that flat snap hard enough to get them to believe it before you come down to this, the second shot in your combo. Throw it harder, short explanation, moving on. So that's what jumped out at me the most, I think, out of that book.
Tristan, anything jump out at that book that you really enjoyed?
It's been a while since I read it, and I tend to group books because I will often read on a certain subject several books, either parallel or one after the other. And Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell was one that I read along with this book, and I would say if you're interested in this topic, definitely touch on that one as well. But the concept of learning is a very valuable one, and there was another. It was a YouTube talk by a bass player by the name of Victor Wooten, who was asked about why adult learners have such a struggle with learning music. And they said for exactly the same reasons that adult learners have issues with learning anything, is they come in with that, I need to have a regimented learning. I want to do this right the first time. They are kind of hard on themselves, but also the method of teaching adult learners is often by negative feedback. And what he talked about is why children are so efficient and learners is, yes, they have brains that are in the sponge kind of phase, but they don't get a bunch of negative feedback, which demoralizes them. And I think that that's an important thing. Like if a child is learning to speak and he or she says something wrong, the parent doesn't just say, that's wrong, don't say it like that. They say, hey, that's great. You're doing wonderful. They know that there's more to go, but it's a positive feedback thing. And like I said, it's been a while since I read the Talent Code, but as I think about what I came away with from that was doing whatever activity it is you want to learn and being interested in it and passionate in it is hinged on, do you get frustrated by being either hard on yourself or having others hard on you, or are you in a positive learning environment where you realize it takes time to learn, but you're enjoying the path, if that makes sense.
Yep. Nope. And that is a big part of that book, and trying to kind of continue that. In fact, we had a long talk, and we'll get into it here earlier while we were prepping for the show, specifically about lifetime learners and what we do, and those who tend to come and go sometimes, and what keeps you around a little bit. And I think that's a real strong topic we should cover. But Antigone, how about you? Which part did you kind of dig?
Yeah, so I technically two, but I'll make it quick. One is that talent is grown. We hear so often in our hobby sport that, oh, you're so talented because you see somebody who has risen very quickly, or picks up things maybe a little bit faster than everybody else around them. And the reality is that person is probably working really hard, or worked really hard before they got to the SCA, and we're just seeing the benefits of it now. And everybody translates that to, you have talent, especially if it's somebody who is physically gifted and good shape. They spend hours in the gym and hours on their, what they eat to be able to do that. So what you're seeing is work. The second thing that I really thought was interesting was talking about failing is actually feedback. It's not you failed, you did something bad, or you're not going to get where you want to go. It's feedback. And I actually got told that very recently at the last Crown tournament by one of my friends when I was very upset about missing something. And they're like, that's just feedback. You didn't fail. It's just feedback. And I think changing the mindset from fail to feedback has really helped me a lot in dealing with some of my frustrations. So that was really, really good to read and see it in print.
Yeah, I think that would be a good conversation as well to make sure we touch on a little bit more as we go forward. So, Your Majesty, what do you got?
Oh my goodness. It's funny, we were talking before the call started about, if we've got several people on, we don't need to be constantly jumping in and out and stepping on everybody. But this book is very close to my heart. In fact, I'm the one that shared the same author wrote another book called The Little Book of Talent, and another book called The Culture Code. And it's been a couple years ago, I think, since I talked to Barry about it, and then he reached out and he was like, "Hey, what's that book you share with your squires?" And so that's why I came up when this conversation popped up, is because Barry and I had already had this conversation, and so I've been like pouring through these books for years, and it's a huge chunk of my teaching agenda. Um, so I'll try to keep it quick, but there's a couple of different things. The failure to kind of extend on what Antigone was saying, you have to create a culture of reaching. They talk about in one of his other books. You're not going to get any better if you're not reaching. If you're afraid to fail, you're not going to get any better. And I've said for years, sucking at something is the first step at eventually being good at something. And creating that environment where you can suck until you learn something and get better is important, because we're so failure averse in this culture today, that being able to tell somebody it's okay, like she said, it's not failure, it's feedback. And then the second thing is it's kind of along that nature versus nurture thing. um you know if you can find a place that's kind of a hotbed of an area that there's a lot of good things happening. And it's funny, I traveled around a lot. I've been in 7 kingdoms, moved 9 times, and one of the things that made it very difficult for me to get knighted was one of the things that helped me become a much better teacher. I've been in Albuquerque mundanely twice, or in the Albuquerque area twice. And back in the early 2000s, I used to drive all the way up from where I lived in a little town called Clovis to Albuquerque to come to the fighter practice. And there were 60, 70 fighters at that fighter practice. We call Albuquerque the Duke City. We've had more kings come out of Albuquerque in the Outlands by far than any other part of the kingdom. And Denver is part of, the Outlands. And it's just a culture of, we've got some, Duke Rothgar, Duke Arton, we've got some really top level folks. And if you get to fight those guys, if you're paying attention, if you're watching what they do, if you're picking up on their processes, you're going to get better. And then the last thing is, great coaching. I've been lucky. I've followed Brannis around a couple times. I was kind of laughing. I posted on my Facebook that I get to be on Coach Gardner with one of my heroes. I teach constantly, and I always try to give credit. Duke Sean is my grand knight. Obviously everybody knows what a great coach he is. That whole lineage, Sean, Timmer, Brian Tarragon, all those guys. I've worked with, Miles and Uther in the West, Duke Sven out of Onsiora, blah, blah, blah. And so I've kind of had 3 different pieces of that have been a really big help to me. Is I've been in the right place, I've had a really good culture, and I've had great coaches.
Awesome.
Sorry,
Guillaume, what do you got? That was good.
So I haven't read the book. I was a bit of a late add to the episode. I did watch a couple videos of people talking about the book that Brannis had shared with me, and I think one of the things that stood out to me the most from that was one of the presenters had talked about the revelatory moment, and that idea of understanding that something is possible. And it really got me thinking about the limits that we place on ourselves, and that frankly, a lot of the limits that we face are self-imposed. We look at something and say, oh, I could never do such a thing. Or that person that does that is so talented, I could never be like that person. But it's all in our minds. And a lot of what they had talked about and what they said that the book presents is understanding that these things are possible and the steps that you can take to try and work towards achieving some of those things. The way I sort of looked at it is you hear the stories all the time of somebody like lifting a car off of somebody in an emergency and doing things that would be considered beyond human potential. But it's not beyond human potential. It is within human potential, but it's beyond the limits of what our minds will typically allow us to do. And so by understanding which of those limits are actually safety measures to prevent us from physically hurting ourselves and which ones are not, or at least not as severe, and where you can push those limits and where you can expand. And so some of what Antigone was talking about is working at that edge and working beyond your comfort zone and in that zone where you're pushing into new territory where you don't fully know how to do something, and that opportunity to fail, opportunity to learn what you can do better, and to be able to build on that. And if you're not pushing past that comfort zone into that area of uncertainty, then you really don't have that opportunity for growth.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to keep mine very simple and short. And mine is essentially the whole chapter on coaching. And, surprise, surprise. But I thought there was a lot of real good focused things, not only for coaches, but for people looking for a coach. Because in there, they talked a lot about, if you don't have a coach that's motivating you, that's growing you, and they give you kind of a list of things, then maybe that person's just not for you. So keep that in mind. And sometimes you outgrow your coach. So don't be afraid to say, hey, can I, if you have a coach that says, no, you can't go work with Tristan, then you might be the wrong coach because everybody has something to learn, right? Or teach. Some teach it better than others, and some people need different things than others. So it's not always perfect, but just I thought that chapter was very good. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to jump into the first one, so how about this voodoo they call myelin? What do you guys think about that? So the book starts in the very beginning, and they talk about myelin, and there's a lot of brain science going up around learning now, and they're actually able to tell what parts of brains light up and what makes up many things. And myelin ends up being one of those things. They talk about people who, as you learn, your nervous system gets kind of like a wrapping around it of myelin itself. And the more you learn about it, the thicker that myelin gets, which also allows and protects that from, they refer to it a lot as electricity. And Barry, I forgot about you. I'm going to jump on you in a minute. But it's interesting. So more insulation, the faster that path goes, the less bleed off you get, all of this kind of stuff. I want to get a kind of a feel what you guys think. It sounds a little woo-woo, but there's science around it, right? And they talk about how to develop it and even when it starts going away. So, but before I go there, all right, Barry, let's go. Hey, you're muted. Strike one.
I was testing to see if you guys are paying attention. And you passed the test. Thank you. I'll jump. I guess I'll jump on my previous comment and then I'll add on to this because I have a myelin comment too. So Simon had talked to, His Majesty Simon. I'm not used to saying that. Had said something about great coaching, and there's a little story of a knight in our area who is a friend of mine. He's a friend of Sir Arn's. I think people know Sir Arn does the heroic show every year. And Sir Arn dragged him out to the pickups at Pennsic. And something he said to him was, these are the people you need to be hanging around. And talked about sort of fostering an environment of we talk about our practices, fostering a practice that's good, but also as an individual. A coach doesn't necessarily have to be your knight and only your knight. In fact, I didn't really get coaching. No offense to my knight. My knight was very good, but he was only my knight for a year. 20 years as an unbelt before becoming a squire. I wasn't that amazing. But after that, I've actually grown so much in my singles. And I'll tell you right now, one of the reasons I'm on this coach's corner is because I stalked these guys until they started letting me hang around them. And one of the reasons why Antigone and I are friends is because I stalked her household and made them teach me how to fight. And I'm still stalking the household, and I don't live anywhere near Texas, but it's like Adult Swim, Golf Wars, Pennsic, anything else that comes up, I'm out there stalking and just trying to soak up whatever I can learn. And so I think that's a big thing about the coaching is, find these coaches, go out there, they'll teach you, so you can do that. And then on to the myelin comment that you had said. One of the things I found fascinating about it. So again, it talks about how you're building this. It's almost like an insulation around your neuropathways. I'm sure I'm getting some of the science wrong, but the way
shielding around a wire.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And what it does, it makes those pathways fire more quickly. So I had a fight recently against a really good fighter who I've never been able to beat before, and I did way better than I ever done before. And if you asked why, there's a handful of things. I mean, it's a total package, but one of the things that was happening was my timing was so much faster. This person used to overwhelm me, and now I can see those little windows open and fire them. And part of that is I have a physical connection in my head that is firing faster because through practice you build that. So one of the things I liked in the book was it's not just psychological. Well, I mean, it's kind of psychological, but it's not just, it doesn't just feel that way. You actually are seeing things faster, and they can actually measure that biologically.
Yep.
Well,
Anyone else want to? Go ahead.
Sorry, I kind of have a weird take on that as well, because it says after you turn 50, you start producing less of myelin. And, you know, I started fighting in the SCA in 88. I didn't get serious about heavy until about 12 or 13 years later. But I'm a better fighter now than I was 10, 12 years ago when I was in the East with Barry. I'm not faster. I'm actually slower, but I'm better as a technical and a tactical fighter. You know, everything that I'm doing now is more about seeing the fight before it happens. And, you know, I don't know if we stop, you know, it's kind of like mapping those neural pathways. You know, I do feel like I'm a lot smarter than I was, you know, 25 years ago. I see things better, you know. It's like the Matrix, you know, you see all the things as it happens, you know, the pattern recognition. So it's kind of an interesting concept to me because I've seen myself get better, but I don't feel like mentally I'm falling off as much as I would think based on their theory.
Yeah, I almost wonder if that's more a matter of the study that they did and the groups that they looked at. Like, are they looking at people that are trying to advance, trying to learn more things past 50? Or did they just make an assumption based on the study group that they had that those people weren't pushing those limits and working to develop their brain further, develop those neural pathways? So I almost would want to look into the science of that a bit more and understand more of where those conclusions have come from.
Yeah, like in my first 30 years or 30... Yeah, my first 30 years in the SCA, I only fought in one crown. You know, since 2018, I've fought in 6 more. You know, I've won a bunch of regular tournaments, but I just never, because of moving around and residency and stuff like that, deployments, what have you, I just never really fought much in crown. I never thought I was good enough, all those things. And so once I started fighting in a bunch of them, man, I feel like I started picking stuff up a lot faster.
So do you think that, and Antigone, right after I just saw your post, do you think that is a couple of things happening? One is you're more focused now than maybe ever before. So mentally you're that's still happening, because not only did they say you don't produce as fast in your 50s, they don't say you don't, but it actually starts degrading as well. And we know, and I also think we're in a sport where mentally what we do means a lot more currently than physically still, because it's an amateur sport. But when you get into sports, you know, like Michael Jordan, you know, they even mentioned in the book, he's probably retired because he started falling out. It's physical quickness and physical, you know, physically we degrade very fast after 50. So we have to watch it all the time. So I agree 100%. I think that the reasons why people like, you know, me and Rongvalder can still compete is because, you know, and Rongvalder's like 62 or whatever, and he's still top of the game in many places. But, you know, the reason why we compete is because we know patterns, right? And the more patterns you know, the more you can chunk. You know, we walk out in the field, and sometimes, and this sounds stupid, it sounds like one of these, you know, these, oh, look at the master does stuff, and, you know, we see all the fake stuff out there and stuff, but we see stuff before that other person really realizes what they're going to do. They start feeling it, they start tensing their body, and we're like, right there. Thank you. I've seen that many times before. I know exactly what I'm going to do. Not only do I know what I'm going to do, I know how I'm going to take care of it. So
Yeah, I've joked
But
that
I think
when I'm fighting a bunch, I've joked that I can see my ears. My peripheral vision gets that good. You know what I mean?
yep,
And it's
yep.
obviously an exaggeration, but sometimes you just feel like, and I think a big part of mine is teaching. I, like Barry, took forever to get knighted. It took me 28 years to get knighted because of all the moving. And then I moved back to the Outlands and just kind of fell into a bunch of squires. I wasn't looking, it just kind of happened. And so for the last 7.5 years, I've had a handful of squires and, trying to teach them, from the ground up. Because
Yeah,
the first three had literally only picked up a sword and been in armor once before they started
yeah.
working with me. And so having to teach those guys from day one and going back and watching all of your videos and Sean's videos and Uther and blah, 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 so that I could remember exactly how to do the basics with them. I think it really, really helped me personally.
Yeah, wait until you get even farther down and you have to break that up. You break those chunks up.
Yeah,
So
I'm
Antigone,
56.
Yeah, yeah. Antigone, all you.
Yeah, so I would definitely want to go and look at the peer-reviewed papers on all of that and the studies, just to see kind of, what was the sample size? What did they look at? I like looking at those statistics. I want to see what all they included or didn't include to make kind of some of those, because sometimes, you're absolutely right. You make some assumptions based off of the pool that you had, and how big was the study? Was it a small study and so forth? But that being said, we all know that the better you can take care of your mind, the longer that mental clarity lasts. And that is
Mhm.
well known with, all kinds of older people, especially like with my mom. I make her do a lot of mental stuff during the day and exercises, and it helps her kind of stay sharp. So it's like anything, if you use it a lot, your body, anything, you use it a lot, it kind of stays engaged and healthy. And that goes for also the kind of the physical component of this as well, is if you're not being healthy, then that definitely affects your mind. And by healthy, I mean not just physically healthy, but I also want to talk first about mentally healthy. So we all know that trauma of all different kinds can really affect the mind and how well it processes and how well the memory works, and kind of the brain fog and everything else. And so you'll see people who are very physically gifted on the field, but due to some mental health issues or trauma, they really struggle and they're not able to get to their full capacity. So I'm not sure that myelin necessarily has really helped with in those sections. So I'd be interested to see how it works with people with trauma. But the last part, and that is, Fox actually asked a question, which I led into a little bit there, was I wonder what diet falls into place in this concept. Any thoughts? So my many members of my household, and then also Duchess Thora up in North Shield, has really, really focused in on diet, health, recovery of the body. That also helps your mind and gives you clarity. So I would say it's huge. It's absolutely huge in my experience. I had to completely change my diet, rework it all. I had to figure out macros. I had to figure out I'm not eating anywhere near enough protein. I almost passed out on the field at Gulf War because I wasn't like respecting the diet that I needed, and I wasn't able to fight properly. So 100% in my experience, seeing other people and talking with them on this subject, and nutritionists as well.
Yeah, just a real quick note on that one. One of the other major pieces on that for your mind is actually, when the mind wears down very much. You can pull this out of Art of Learning, but the mind wears down very much like the physical body does. And if you take a break from whatever you're doing, you can actually kind of recover a little bit. And that was one thing out of that book that came, was like, he's playing chess, obviously, and every hour or so he'd go outside, run up and down the hall, or whatever he had to do, splash some water on his face, so he's not thinking about the game anymore. And then he comes back in, and he's back in and recovered. It actually changed his game a lot, past the 2.5 hour point from what he took on his statistics of where he was breaking down mentally. So I thought that was a good one. Tristan, the other real quick one is sleep. Sleep is one of these new things. You're seeing it a lot. It's because everyone's like, oh, I get 4 hours of sleep and I'm great. That's all bullshit. Some people can get away with that, but the key is sleep is the critical piece, not only for your body, but for your mind.
Especially as you get older.
Yep, 100%. Go ahead, Tristan.
Yeah, this is something that I picked up from a housemate who was a competitive runner in college. And he shared with us back in the day, he said, drink about a liter and a half of water about a half hour, 45 minutes before you fight, and that will thin your blood. I could tell a huge difference when I would do that, because I could feel when, my blood was thick, you have a big dinner or something, or, big breakfast and whatnot. And you go out and you try to fight, and you just feel like your heart is pumping hard and you're almost fighting your body. Whereas when your blood thins out more, it goes through the heart much quicker, goes through the veins and capillaries and stuff. And it is like a night and day difference. So I just wanted to add that to the diet kind of discussion about hydration. And that simple formula was crucial for the difference of feeling like you're almost pushing against your body versus you're being able to move smoother and have better. It feels like you have better cardio. Your heart's not really in any better condition, but it has less work to do when your blood is a little thinner. So just that tip I wanted to throw in.
Awesome. All right. Go ahead, Simon.
So back on the diet piece. So I've been a personal trainer in the past, and I always had a pretty decent diet. But I had some health problems crop up in my late 40s, and I basically went, gluten-free, dairy-free, all that. And then I got in my current relationship with my wife, my queen, and I'd never understood self-care as a concept. Like, just wasn't a thing, 53-year-old dude, what's self-care, right? And so, water, drinking all the time, she's constantly on me. I get massages now. She's a big fan of the float spa, the floating in the magnesium salts. I do that, once every month or so. I do a variety of other things and get more sleep and eat a lot healthier. And, I'm, right now I'm kind of struggling because I hurt myself getting ready for Crown. And then I've been crowned for the last, Prince and then King for the last, 5 months. And, anybody that's ever been in this job knows you don't really have much extra time to do those things. So physically, I'm right now, I'm kind of struggling, but I was fighting 3 days a week at the gym, 3 days a week, help practice a couple days a week. And, I fought 25 days leading up to Crown between January, February, and March, which is a lot. And the only way I was able to do that was all of this, diet, tons of water, self-care, massage, all those things. And so that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes we just blast through all of that, and we can do that when we're young. I am with you.
Until I was about 40.
Yeah, now I spend more time stretching than lifting weights. I get you. So let's move on to the next one, because I think to create that myelin, we have to do something. And what they talk about in this book is deep practice. I think when people look at deep practice, they're like, oh, well, I go to practice. And I see that way too much. And what that means is, you go to practice. Well, I go work out, but if I just go and lift lighter weights than I need and never push myself, am I ever really going to get that much bigger? Well, that same thing applies to practice. So who would like to start the conversation about, where they see deep practice, either from the book or even from your experience?
I got a piece on that.
Okay.
And it's something honestly that I again, I still frequently and I try to credit whenever possible. But I watched a ton of videos when I decided that I really was getting serious in the last handful of years before I got knighted, and then the last 5, 6 years once I really got on the path to winning a crown. And so I watched all these videos. I read these books. I've got all of Daniel Coyle's books here, and slow, like as slow as you think you can go slower. You know, really exaggerate the motions he talks about in this book and the other book. To the point where, they always say, amateurs practice till they get it right, professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. And we'll be out there talking flat snaps and wraps and this, that, and the other, and I can be falling off my feet and throw the shot I want because I've thrown it 100 million times. And I started out throwing it really slow on the pedal, you know and so that's something that he talks about in the book that really connected with me is deep practice. Like you said, people are like, oh, I went to practice. Well, you showed up at practice, you put your armor on, you fought 3 guys for a grand total of about 15 minutes, and then you sat around and BS'd for the rest of practice, and then you took your armor off and went home and drank a bunch of beer and whatnot, and then you didn't do anything until you came to the next practice, right? Whereas you come, you do some, the king, my predecessor, Sir Zachariah, comes to the park and does yoga for 20 to 30 minutes before he ever picks up a stick. Sir Baku, another one of our knights, does Tai Chi before he ever picks up a stick, and then he works through the concepts and the processes before he fights somebody. And now you're talking about deep practice because you're getting your body ready, you're getting your mind ready, and you're putting them all together. And then you can't just get out there, like you said, lift light weights and never do cardio and never push yourself. If you're out there and you're fighting, I've tried for years to be the first guy on the field and the last guy out, and because there's just no substitute for stick time.
Yep. Barry, I think you got something. Uh-oh.
He's the king of talking.
See, he developed some island. And now he remembers.
Talking on mute is Barry's superpower.
I was testing you guys again. You passed. Yeah, so I'm also a musician, and I was actually a musician long before I was a fighter. And so I like the musical references. One of the things they talked about in the book was the music school, where they would take a piece of music and they would take the measures of the music. As you don't know, there's like little tiny pieces of music, and they would chop. So like a song might have 200 measures, and they chop them up, and they're just like little tiny licks that don't really make any sense. And and they would put them in a hat and then draw one, and then they would just practice that one little piece over and over and over again. And part of what you're doing there is you're not thinking about the whole song, we are the champions or whatever it is, because your brain's going to kind of think of it like on a broad level, and you're going to play what you think you're playing. You're just taking this like one little thing and you're going over the technique over and over and over again. So they talked about that, and they also said this is what Simon just said, but they talked in the book. They said practice so slowly that you don't recognize the song. Like if somebody walks by, they don't even know what song you're playing. And this is the deep practice component of that, about really taking a piece of your fighting as an example, and whether it's on the Pell or you're working with another person, but really slowing it down and focusing on just a little part of what you're doing there. I would like to add to that's not 100% of the time. Like the Pell work is not 100% of the time slowly. The fighting, I mean, obviously we have to fight at speed, and there's some value to that. But most people don't have a problem doing it at speed. They have the problem slowing it down, and they don't do it slowly. And I want to say one of the things that I'm adding into my routine right now is I'm 52 years old. We all age differently. His Majesty just said 25 practices in a small period of time. I can't do that, at least not if they're normal fights. My joints can't handle that. And that's a point where I am in my fighting. And so I don't want to give up on getting better. And so I'm really starting to focus more and more on other ways. Like, how can I make my actual practice time more effective? The Pell, I used to do a lot of Pell work, and now I'm really doing the super slow motion Pell work because it's easy on my joints. And even if the fast Pell work was better, I can't do it. So now I'm going to do the super slow stuff to at least try to get that stuff in there. So with that, so the deep practice, it's just about taking, again, some portion of your practicing and really focusing on stuff, slowing it down, getting it right. As Simon just said, practice until you can't get it wrong. Side note to that, I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand is this is a bad analogy that I use, but they'll say something like, oh yeah, I got it. It's like, no, you don't have it. Like a drummer, they can go left, right. I was like, 40, 50 years from now, they're still practicing that, making it better. Or a marathoner, I can say, all right, left foot, then right foot. Okay, you got it. Go run a marathon. No, you have to practice thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of reps. Not to overwhelm you. I mean, a couple hundred reps will also help, for the next fight. But so those are
Okay, Antigone, is your turn.
Yeah, so deep practice breeds obsession. That's where you get it from.
Say that one again.
Deep practice breeds obsession. You're welcome.
Yep. Writing that down.
Yeah. So one of the big things that we do is we made it structured. So and most of this came from Helga. Where she got it from, I can't answer that, but I do know we worked and refined it through the beginning of me working with her. But we built actually a framework structure that gives you deep practice. And it works for anyone, no matter how good you are, what level you are, how well you learn, your learning teachings, how it doesn't matter. This structure works. And that's a 3-part. And so I'm going to give you 3. We're going to figure out by looking at what you're doing, what do you need to do next? Like, what's the next big thing that you need to work on? And then we're going to break that down into minutia of all these little bitty pieces to get there. And then we're going to start at the beginning, or where we think the beginning is. And that's going to be the number one thing you're going to work on. And you're going to work on that for 6 to 8 weeks, because that's about how long it takes for the brain to really process it in the body. Then we're going to give you a second thing, which is the next thing in line. And that's something that you can work on if the first thing you're having trouble with, or you accomplish it and you feel good. And it also kind of gives you something kind of to go back and forth, because just working on one thing for 6 weeks and it's literally, how do I hold my block, kind of sucks. And then we're going to give you a third thing. And the third thing is out of your reach. And that's kind of what some of the deep practice is we want to give you something that you are going to have to struggle with a little bit and work hard for. And so that third thing, if you don't get it in this 6-8 weeks, that's quite all right. So at the end of that 6-8 weeks, we're going to talk about where we look at it. And then if you've done the first thing, cool, that's off the list. Now you're on this. This is 1, 2, and then we'll add a third. And we just keep going through this process over and over and over again, breaking it down and building these building blocks one on top of the other until you become like this level of fighter. And you get there and you're like, well, but I didn't do anything great. I didn't have these giant leaps in my fighting. No, that's not what we're after. We're after this right here, rather than what we see a lot in the SCA, which is here plateau, here plateau. And we found that through this method, I haven't plateaued during any of my rise. It's been pretty much a fairly steady. There's little bits, but it's been fairly steady. And almost everybody who's used this method has found the same way. So it's definitely removed a lot of the frustration by putting you in a deep practice structure. The other thing we do to kind of help with this is you need to be able to talk about it. This comes to coaching, what I know we're getting into, but at the end of every practice, whoever you're working with or is your coach, you send them 3 good things that you did that you thought you did well, and you send them 3 things that you think you need to work on. And that gives you the positivity that you want, and that good positive feedback, and it makes you look at what you did well, which some of us struggle with. And then it also helps you look at, well, what do I need to work on for next time, and be really, really good at kind of self-reflection, which also helps with deep practice. So you can kind of drive that if your coach isn't there, or help your coach drive it. So that's kind of the piece that that I wanted to relay on that.
Awesome. I like that. It's a definitely a nice way to look at it. Yo online says it's like schooling EIP, individual education plan type of deal. So
Yes, 100%.
that's where we say, what you know, it works in more than one place, right? Tristan.
Yeah. By the way, this is something I've noticed not only within SCA practices, but also in modern martial art training in general. And that is kind of the mindset that if I just show up and I listen, that's good enough. Like I'll learn something by being passive. And I don't think that's the case. I know in the lead up for this show, we talked about stealing technique or stealing methods. And that really made me think, because I've long said I'll go steal from anybody. I've stole more stuff from Bronis. Honest to God, I'd take his shoes if I could get away with it. But that means by stealing, that means you're being active. You are not just sitting and listening and watching and trying to just absorb by osmosis. You are actively looking to create something that isn't there in you from other sources. And that's what I would say is the way to open the door to deep practice. Don't worry so much about every moment you spend in a practice and what exactly you're doing. You can get into that. If you go into a practice saying, I want to build something today. By the end of this practice, I want to have something that I do be better than what I walked in with, and be active about that, not passive by just putting on armor and just going out and sparring. You can do that and you can get better, but I've watched people that take that approach, and that is the long, very long path. And they often will get frustrated because they'll see people come in that are active about their practice and about the having priorities of things you want to work on. Just like Antigone said, from the last practice where somebody said, hey, here's 3 things you need to work on. Take those 3 things, build them. And that is what you're actively working on. And what exactly that is can be so drastically different, and it will change. You may not focus on one thing for 6 weeks. You may focus on it at 1 practice or 2 practices in a row, and you'll notice that you're getting better at it. And then, of course, you'll notice 3 other things that you need work on, and that list will always be rotating. But the mindset of saying, I'm not just going to go and show up and hang out and just kind of float and hope that some knowledge somehow seeps into my eyes and ears, that you are actively producing in your pursuits. Now, that doesn't mean you can't check the boxes of, I want to go to practice to be around my friends. I want to go to my practice to socialize a bit. Just make sure that you check off the boxes of, what am I building today? And then work in your socializing and hanging out with your friends and those other things. And that way you will enjoy the practice. Those are important things too, because you'll enjoy the whole experience and say, I got to get back and do that again. I got to go next week. I can't miss it. But include that build something mentality. That would be my recommendation.
All right. Hey, Simon, did you have something else you want to cover?
I do. So it's funny, Tristan, we used to say when I was still active duty, and you've got those people at a meeting that are just not accomplishing anything. There's a difference between placeholders and stakeholders, right? And yeah, you got to be an active participant. And it's funny, Antigone and I seem to be really on the same page, but it also might be because I've also learned a lot from Helga. Helga's pretty baller. So, but we were talking about in the chat, the concept of chunking it up, which is kind of similar to what Antigone and Helga are doing. And Tristan also mentioned modern martial arts, which I've been doing my entire adult life. I did MMA for a long time. And in most of those classes, you only teach like 3 techniques, and they're usually tied together. And I also teach a class teaching in the SCA, because teaching in the SCA is a very unique environment. You got everybody in the SCA loves to help, wants to jump in, even when they're completely wrong. They think they're helping, right? And it makes it a very challenging environment. So chunking it up, taking in little bite-sized pieces. I say all the time, how do you eat an elephant? one bite at a time, right? And so when I teach, I try to teach no more than 3 concepts at once, and I try to teach them fairly simply, and I try to have them connect, to be able to connect the dots. And then, back to the hundreds of repetitions, but you've got to be able to, in that environment, take that thing that you're being taught and be willing to go out and do it and suck at it, be willing to go out and not be very good and fail at it. And we need to create an environment of failure is okay. You've got to go out and get out of your comfort zone, because it actually talks about the 3 zones as well. You got to get out of your comfort zone, and then, learning from failure. I lost 6 crowns in a row before I won one. We're getting to the point where my wife was like, I don't know if I'm going to let you fight anymore. This is kind of sucking. Being able to be willing to fail, be able to kind of connect all those dots, and then getting that positive feedback when you are willing to fail, which is very similar to what Antigone and Helga are doing with their feedback loop. And then that kind of creates that. We were going to talk about the next thing is ignition, kind of that ignition piece, and that creates that spark, like Antigone was saying, deep practice breeds obsession. You do it enough, and then you start to get good, and then it's like fun, right? And then there's that ignition. And then, like I said earlier, I've been very lucky to be in some really cool spots with some really high level fighters. And you go and you fight a high level fighter and you get smoked a handful of times or 100 times or however many times. And then you fight that really high level fighter and you fight him a really good fight. You may not beat him, but like you really push him. And then eventually you beat him. And then everybody that comes to that practice, if they're in that mindset of, let's all jump in and get better, high tide raises all the boats. I fight Brenos. Brenos kicks my ass. I fight Barry. I kick Barry's ass. Eventually, we all kind of make the wheel go around, and we get better. And that's when you ignite that hotbed of better. Because they talk about it in the book. The Brazilian soccer players, they play a variation of soccer, and everybody plays it growing up. And then the first LPGA golfer, Sae Pak, the first Korean woman to ever win an LPGA tournament. And then after that, it broke open the floodgates, because all of a sudden those Korean women saw her and said, hey, she looks just like me. I can do that. And I had a very similar epiphany because, I'm 5'9" and I never weighed over 185 pounds until the last couple of years. And I'm fighting against 300-pound behemoths, right? But I can see Branos out there kicking ass, Craven from Aytonville out there kicking ass, right? Neither of those guys is any bigger than me, right? And Craven weighs like a buck and a half, right? And so when I see people like me succeeding, that creates that ignition.
Awesome. Thank you. And my understanding is you got to pop off for a little bit, Your Majesty. You got a meeting.
I have a meeting with my Crown entrance because Crown is this weekend. If I can jump back on, I will. So
that would be great.
I'm going to keep the line open.
Well, no matter what, thank you for joining us. I told you have great stuff, so I look forward if you can come back.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Barry, for reaching out. Again, this is super close to my heart. I love these books, and I give them all to my squires. Every one of my squires gets the little book of talent, a notebook, and a good pen. And I expect them to give me feedback on the book.
That's awesome.
And, my wife is a concert harpist. She's a world-class harpist. Yeah. She was the first harp role in the SCA. And she read the book and loved it. So it works for everybody.
It does.
Thanks, y'all.
No problem.
Thanks, your
All right, Guillaume.
Real quick, I just want to say now that Simon's gone, he never kicked my ass. And my inspiration was if he could get knighted, I could get knighted. I'm kidding. Simon's awesome. And he's
do it while he's gone. I see how
you're exactly.
Yeah,
Barry. Now
that's how Barry rolls.
I can't leave. Barry's like, I kick Bronis's ass with spear all the time.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I want to throw in about deep practice, I think we had some really good presenters present some really good information about deep practice. I think one of the biggest challenges, especially for newer fighters, is understanding what deep practice even is in the first place. And we covered it to a certain extent. And so it's sort of, I'm looking at this almost like a capstone or rephrasing of things rather than anything particularly new. But when I think about deep practice, I think about it as practice with intent. And when I think back over my SCA career, for I've been fighting for 24 years now, something like that. And for most of that time, I went to practice, I put on armor, I went and fought and tried to beat the other person and took my armor off at the end of the day, went home. Post-COVID, coming back out, the intent has changed entirely. Starting practice with warming up with stretches, footwork drills, and then into fighting. And then while I'm doing the fighting, I'm trying to work on something specific. And then most days what I'll do is I'll after the fight, I sit down and I write down what went well and what didn't based on what I was trying to do, and then use that to frame what I'm going to do next. And so I've got that rolling intent of what it is that I'm trying to work on in the next fight. And it's keeping me focused on trying to push that edge and push for that improvement. And so that idea of practice with intent to me is what I see as that deep practice, and the focus on looking for an area to be able to push something that you don't do well and be able to try and improve on. So I know that His Majesty sort of rolled into it a little bit. So I think our next topic is more about ignition and sort of getting that groundswell of the belief in your capability of doing things. So I'll switch back to you, Browns.
All right. So, there's a couple of things on ignition, and His Majesty definitely covered some of that. In the book, they talk about a number of ignition points for multiple groups, including Little League Baseball, which came from, there's a little island that participates in essentially the world, the world Little League. And what they saw is that it was one guy, and he'd have to drive around and, essentially, try to have a big free baseball thing on the side of his van and talk to parents and get kids to come out. And then they found that one of the people from the island actually made it into the World Series, pro World Series, and he hit 2 home runs. And everyone's like, oh my God, he was never ranked super high or anything, obviously good enough to be a pro. But after hitting 2 home runs, he became the hottest thing ever. And next thing you know, he has a lineup at his practice. He's teaching the same way. This man literally lives above home plate in a 1-room shack. It's not a rich island. And but since then, that little group of guys, in fact, it's the only baseball diamond on the island. Since then, they have gone to the Little League World thing 8 times, and I think they won. They won once or twice, been in the finals a couple. Not that they were any greater than anyone else, but I think that's where that ignition started, and then it just kept building. And they built on that ignition was those 2 home runs, in that World Series. So that they saw was somebody that could do it, and I think that's a big part for ignition. And I think there's a lot of stuff to talk here. It's interesting because I was going through and listening to some other folks, and they were like, ignition can start in many ways. I'm not sure if that's the right word for it. There's probably other words for it, but Barry talked about, the practice, having a great practice builds, is sometimes that ignition for somebody. Or if it starts locally and you have a group of people, you create that hotbed. And sometimes that's, the spark. I will tell you, though, you could also have a place that's great. And if you don't have anybody running and it's not consistent, that spark lasts very short. And the second piece of it, you have to watch, because if that fire is burning real hot, then nobody ever feels like they can burn as hot, and they're getting burnt all the time. So that motivation actually goes away. So you have to be really careful on that scenario. But and I think, Barry, you wanted to talk about this first?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to jump off on what you said, and I want to. I'm stealing something from Antigone. I hope I don't take what she's going to say next. But we actually talked about this before the show started. Was not so much the hotbed of dukes and great teachers, but the hotbeds of unbelts that form a camaraderie, and they're all really close to each other. And I said in Philadelphia, I got back into fighting and in 11 years ago, and we didn't have a single grant level fighter at our practice. And we've had 5 people get elevated in the last 3 years. And it was this group of unbelts that were all kind of chasing each other and sharing ideas and pushing each other. And that really helped us. But the one piece that I want to say that's a value that a listener can take from this is that's great when that happens. But if you want to get good at fighting, like I play Dungeons and Dragons twice a week. I'm sorry, I'm a nerd if you guys didn't know. I play Dungeons and Dragons twice a week, and I do 0 prep for the game. I show up, I hang out, I roll some dice, I tell some awesome, amazing jokes that everyone laughs at all the time, as you'd expect. And we eat some, drink some beer and eat some chips, and then I go home, and that's all the effort I put into it. And if somebody doesn't schedule it, then I don't go. But that's not how you get good at something. If you want to be a good fighter, we had some moments where our practices were moving around, and we tried a new space, and of the 4 or 5 of us, we could never get more than one person to show up at a time, and it just wasn't working. And we got together on a chat group, and we're like, hey, this is not working. When are people available? When do you want to meet? I mean, I've had practices that I've called at my house with foam weapons on a weekend to say, hey, I haven't seen you in 3 weeks, and no one else has really been pushing me at practice. You haven't been making it. When are you free to fight? And when can we, get together and do this? So I think that's the real value, is that if you're motivated and you really want to get better at fighting, which that's kind of what the show's focused on, is to, make the effort, put that together, however it needs to happen. So anyway, Brando stepped out. He was hosting. So I'll say it sounds like Antigone has something to add to this. So
Thanks, Barry. You're such a great host.
thank you.
Yeah. So ignition is drive. So when we talk about in this way, the concept where it says ignition, that seems kind of foreign because we use the word drive actually a lot in the SCA combat, at least in all the places I've been when we've discussed it. And you can't force somebody to have drive, but you can give them reasons to have drive. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One, you could be inspirational. Seeing somebody who looks like you or is your size making it to the finals of Crown Tournament, win or not, it can be inspirational. Like, oh crap, this person can do it. That means I could train just as hard and maybe do it as well. And you see that. You see that when, in our Crown Tournament in Onstura, we had more women fighting in that Crown Tournament than ever in the history. It was insane because the Crown Tournament before we had, a handful. And so we just brought more and more showing them you can do that, right? So that created drive to train. All these women wanted to train to be good enough to be in Crown Tournament. And they did. And then you also can have drive from just wanting to prove people wrong. And being pissed about it. Like somebody said something to you and you're just like, no, I'm going to do this thing. And that creates drive. To me, it doesn't matter where that drive comes from. All that matters is that you have it. And if you don't have it internally just on your own, then you kind of have to find ways to create that for yourself, or, which we're going next, have a coach or a trainer that can help give you that drive, like lead you to it. But in the end, if you don't have drive, no matter what, it's not going to matter. You're only going to go so far without it. And keeping that passion engaged and staying on the path and the grind as it is for so many years is incredibly difficult. This is not even an amateur sport. It's a hobby. That a bunch of nerds do. So being able to sustain that, you have to have something that motivates you, and it can change, but it's got to be something to give you the drive.
Yeah, I can add to that real quick. So you're talking about the drive and motivation. One of the things that we've been doing at our practice lately, we did it this year, and it's actually worked out really well. We have a practice tournament once a month. We stole this idea from Atlantia. There's 2. There's like the Orin board. the Orin board, I think it's called, and I forget what the other one's called, but they have a monthly practice. They post results on their page and everything. And yeah, we started doing it. I'll tell you the format, and I'll say it's actually was invented by SCA Tally. If you know, he's a fencer now. He used to be a heavy fighter, and he does all the. It's like him and Renegade Paladin are the two people that do all the videos on YouTube. Yeah, and basically what we do is we have it's random pairings each round. Shiv get eliminated after their first loss. Grant Level get eliminated after their second loss. And then if you have any award other than those, it's the third loss. And if you have no awards at all, then you get 4 losses. So it's a nice way to kind of handicap the tournament. And but it's still, you have to win, you have to perform well. The better fighters generally make it pretty far. And it's been like low pressure, but it's kind of something for people to look forward to, because the reality is here on the East Coast, we don't have a ton of tournament events that people get a chance to go get some experience at. Without really driving far and putting yourself in sort of an unfamiliar environment. So it's been great for the newer fighters to kind of come in. And we've even had, one who's very new, and the first tournament, he went 0-4. And the second tournament, he went 0-4. And he said, but man, my fights lasted a lot longer in the second tournament than they did in the first tournament. And so he kind of saw that as marked improvement. So that's been a thing to help kind of keep people motivated, because I think that's what we're talking about here, like a little bit of that ignition to kind of keep people involved and to give them something to strive for. End scene.
All right. Okay, good. I got a couple of things on this one. And, I think I've been lucky enough to be in a very good practice. And we actually have two a week for a long time. But and we'll talk about this under coaching a little bit more later. But I think the key here is that everybody's ignition point sometimes is a little different, and so you have to be careful of that as a coach. Some need that motivation, and then there are times when they need that push, and to get them to see more is beyond. So. This is stuff that it's easy as some people say it's not good, but it's not always the right way or the right thinking. I think they look as like, we're going to grind these guys until they see the excitement, where other people are, we're going to point out those individual points where they perform. People have to be sick of me saying perfect and they didn't hit the person. Right? But that's not the point. The point is they did the thing. Just because the other person did the thing that block it or anything else, it still didn't make it wrong. And there's still, if you see it was better than last time, it still may not be perfect. But if you see that it was better than last time, then if they don't know it's that way, they may give up on the next step because they may never think they're getting there. So just be aware of that in that dream. And that goes to the inspiration piece. There's that inspiration of when somebody does something right, you have to say it. And then also understand how they, lots of coaches take that off of the empathy around seeing how somebody learns. But you can also, we've gone through a lot of just asking, how do you like learning? If I'm just doing drills every day and somebody comes in and is like, that's not why I'm here, they're going to leave. And that's why I asked, what kind of learner? Do you like drills or do you like just going and doing it? And we have both happening at our practice all the time. You have to open that variety up. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. So also, sometimes you have to take a step back as the person, I may be the coach, but I'm also working on myself. Sometimes you have to take me and Rongold are kind of operate outside sometimes of the group of people pushing. Because if we look at that group of people pushing it and we're trying to compete in it, we're destroying it. But when you see that there's a couple of close people, a lot of times I'll grab an unbelt and like, oh, you're really close to them. That's the person that you want to start getting some more fights with. And then look at this next person after that, and give them a couple of points of where to go and then build those communities. That's what makes the talent hotbed. The coach helps guide those people, but those people are the ones making it. So if you're part of that environment, if you're on the top side and you're just smashing everybody down, probably not the best idea. But if you're creating excitement, ignition, that's the key. So, all right. I think Guillaume, are you pushing us?
Yeah, let me jump in real quick on this, and it may segue into the coaching piece, because you talked about something there as a coach and recognizing when somebody's executing something correctly, even if it isn't a good shot, in that actually hitting the opponent. It's one of the things that I find that I'm at a stage now as a coach where I'm trying to learn and improve on as a coach, in recognizing what the student is working on, what feedback to give them, and for my vision as of what I'm watching and what I'm seeing develop, and being able to pick up on some of that. And so I think that's a skill that we can maybe talk a bit more in the coaching section as well. But it's certainly something that I'm looking at, how to improve myself as a coach, and being able to watch the fight, see what's unfolding, and be able to give feedback, that positive feedback, even if you didn't win the fight, you still executed this well, you're working on this correctly, et cetera, and being able to see those. And I think that's something that level of vision is something that I think I need to develop more as a coach, and it's something I'm looking at from a coaching perspective. But I also feel like it's something that's going to benefit me as a fighter as well, because I'm going to recognize things in my opponent that I wouldn't normally recognize, because I'm looking at them with that coaching eye as well. So I just wanted to mention that, because it's something that you had said about seeing that and giving that positive feedback. But we've got to be able as coaches to recognize that correct action to be able to give the positive feedback as well. So that's a skill to consider, as if you were a coach or aspiring coach, is to train your skills of observation and watching what's happening to be able to give that feedback.
So let's go ahead and jump into the coaching side, because this is really, I mean, I think when we first started it, this group was here to help build new coaches, like you're talking about, Guillaume. I'm gonna start, and there's a lot of pieces here, but the first is the kind of the teacher circuit blueprint that they talk about. But really, I think the key is, and we could probably talk about this one and how we've seen it. It's coaching is a long, intimate conversation and series of signals from essentially your people you're working with. The key is understanding them, and I think some people, that's a now we're not even talking technique, but we're talking inner skills of interperson communications. So anybody want to kind of cover that? I think that's probably one of the most important pieces out of coaching.
Sure. Yeah, I covered this one a little bit.
Okay.
And like I said, the same thing goes with instructors in martial art dojos and what have you. Usually when people seek out mentors, coaches, or instructors, they are looking for a top performer, like really excellent technician. They want to be trained by a champion or one of the best. And they will often overlook like how good the technical ability is good and admirable, but does this person have that communication skill that a good coach or a mentor will have? Or if they do they have a way that resonates communicating with them? Because there are certain people that when you talk to them and you want their knowledge and you listen to what they say, your brain just goes, I can't really make heads or tails of this. It may make sense to the person that's trying to teach you, may make sense in their head, but the language they're using is nothing. You just can't relate to it. The people that I admire the most as coaches, will tend to have different vocabulary, because they recognize when a student needs to hear something that resonates with them, and they can tell when they describe it, it's not resonating. And so they need to shift language a little bit in order for the student to really absorb and understand what's trying to be conveyed. But where it really fails to work is when a student is not clicking with the coach or the mentor, but they really admire them and they want to keep kind of forcing it. And that's where I guess the stealing thing comes in. We talked about earlier, which you will learn a lot. You'll learn quite a bit from what you're told. You'll learn even more from what you see and what you study and what you steal. So the idea that you can, have a mentor, even for 20 minutes, you go off to a foreign war and you say, I really like the way that this fighter's doing something. I want to watch, I want to steal it. You may not even need to talk to them. You can watch what they do, try to break it down, and then take it from them. But and this is why I like what you said about that communication part, is that, I've seen quite a few, especially new coaches or people getting into it, that say, I just need to sit down here and preach. I need to just tell people how it's going to go, what they got to do, and then they either
all
do it or
about
they
them.
don't do it. Yeah. But they often don't read the room. They don't read the student and say, are they grasping this? Am I speaking in relatable language that they're absorbing and understanding? Just some observations. I've seen great instructors, and I've seen the most horrible ones you could even imagine. And some of them are 5th, 6th, 7th degree black belts that are teaching full-on seminars to hundreds of people, and they're awful. I've had some of the best seminars ever taught by 2nd degree black belts. They may not be the best technician, but boy, they can relate to a student. They can come up and just in a few moments give that student what he really needs, or she really needs to build the skills that they need to have, and have those real light bulb moments.
Totally agree. I think, Antigone, are you next?
Yeah, I am up. So I think we're talking about two different things. One is being a trainer, and two is being a coach. And they are two different skill sets. They often people can coach and train a lot of times, but not necessarily. And so I'll talk about both, if that's okay. The first one being somebody's trainer, and that is, I am teaching you a skill, I'm imparting knowledge to you, and I have to learn how you learn. I have to learn how to communicate properly, direction clearly, so that you can then replicate and not be frustrated. And that really is more in a training situation. And that is a skill set that is very difficult to do, and I think takes a long time. Coaching, however, that's a separate skill set from that training. And coaches can be almost anybody, even people that don't fight can be your coach. There are plenty of people who have been around a lot of fighting for many, many years, or retired, or maybe are somebody's significant other that sat and watched 20 years of them teaching, that can coach somebody, right? Consorts a lot of times become their fighter's coach. And so that skill set requires you to understand more about that person's personality, what drives them, and help them work through things. And that's a little different. So I often end up coaching people and only having 5 minutes ahead time to get to know them, like such as in the Roses tournament at Penzic that Barry's very aware of. He had one of his fighters in it. I ended up drawing them in a draw as a Rose, and I spent 5 minutes just getting as much info dump as I could from him, and then watched his first fight, and then from there was able to coach him through the rest of it, and adjust some things and help him work through things. And I think he was very pleased with how he did in that tournament that day. And I get pulled into that all the time for tournament coaching, because I have that skill set where I can look at a person, I can ask them, I have a whole series of questions I can ask them very, very quickly, and then I can adjust and kind of help them work through the day. And that doesn't, and you could have somebody who's your support that does that. Like maybe the event I was just at, like I didn't have a coach or anybody with me, but I did have a friend who acted as support. They made sure I ate, they drank, made sure I was okay. Oh, you need to take a step off. Let's go talk about this. Let's do something else, And that person essentially helped me through my fighting, even though they weren't officially like a coach or somebody who really understood what they were doing. They fulfilled that need for me. And so I just wanted to make sure that we have two separate concepts, and that anybody can actually be a coach.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to break those up. We'll find, because there's a lot of trainers. A boxer has a lot of trainers, dietitian, all these other folks, not necessarily as coach. If you look at a coach of a team, he has lots of people, kind of other coaches that do have to understand the personality of an individual and the motivation. But their primary job is to teach what is going to win a football game. and then overall, the overall coach is really a lot of times figuring out if that person's going to work for the team or not, and how to get them there if they're not working out. And that's a different mindset a little bit around that. And again, I think there's a lot of emotional awareness that happens in that time period between a coach and sometimes a teacher. But I think many times, especially in smaller sport groups, that coach and trainer are the same person. In a dojo, that coach and trainer is the same person, because we don't have as much competition going on. In our sport, tell you the truth, we're half the time just looking around to get information. We talk a lot about trainers and coaches here, and I think some people do use it this way, but we have a lot less formality around any of it. I think the key is just to understand that becoming one of these people takes time. What you'll find, and I read another book from Strength to Strength, is specifically about going from your 40s or the end of a career in whatever you do to the next part. And this is really kind of covering, hey, I'm going to get retired, and what's going to happen after I retire. And what they found was that some of the best teachers' reviews were teachers that were already in their later ages. Younger teachers tended to not have as much understanding about emotional awareness that an older teacher does. So they were able to pick up some points there. So sometimes this is about depth. I could tell you that before I look back at some of the stuff I acted and did as a trainer early, and time, that time period was different. But now I look at it and go, oh my God, I really sucked. Why did anybody listen to me? And compared to now, because the key is continual growth, not only if you're a fighter in technical skills, but if you really want to be a coach and teacher. And you heard His Majesty say it earlier, that he became a better fighter when he became a better teacher. And, I think that same thing goes for coaching. If you really want to be here, listen to these shows, listen to other people. I read volleyball coaches, I read baseball coaches, football coaches. I go through all of that stuff because I'm just trying to find things where I could help others. And the good part is it makes me think about what I do. And the more I understand what I do, the better I can do that as well. So if I have to meditate, or if I understand why meditation works, that helps me as well. So I think that's a big piece. I think another big piece is, perception as a coach, and or a trainer. If somebody's actually, you have to watch. You can't just blurt stuff out and expect them to go do it and then think you're a good coach, because it's not the way it works. Now you're just focusing on yourself, but you really take a look, be sharp about finding the things that are going to drive that person. Fix the small pieces. I'm going to tell you, this goes back a deep practice. Fix the small pieces in Russian boxing. If you're any part of your kinetic chain is off, they're pointing it out right away. Bang, 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 bang. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Right? If you're not good for that, then you can leave the school. That's just the way they work it. Right? But they have that choice. But I think it's important that if you really want to help people, you have to be you have to see what they're doing and then find the places to fix or find the places to complement. So I think Barry was going to jump in next.
Unmute. I'm there.
You are learning faster and faster now.
Yeah, I need to learn to have my mouse over by the unmute button. But I've got two screens here, and it's one of the challenges I will say with the SCA is it's for those of you old enough to remember Little House on the Prairie. They taught in a one-room schoolhouse. So Brando, it's like when you were growing up, it was the one-room schoolhouse, right?
I knew it was going to go there.
But it's a one-room schoolhouse, which if anyone doesn't know that reference, it's, you're teaching 5-year-olds and you're teaching, I don't know if they went up to 18 at the time, but you're teaching, the oldest levels. And with that, you're teaching very smart kids and maybe kids that are struggling. And we kind of have that at our practices. I mean, someone may be a fantastic coach for knights, you know, to get knights to be better knights, and someone may be really good for squires. And I think it's good to know that about yourself. But when you're dealing with a local practice you're trying to foster, it's difficult, and you have to learn, you know, different tools. Some people want to show up and they want to figure it out on their own. They want to experiment. And with those people, you know, I find, you know, give them a little nudging. You know, I'll do a little. There's one person I can think of in particular that does a lot of experimentation. Fantastic fighter, fighting at a near Shiv level. But there's a particular move that I don't like that he does because it exposes the side, and I throw an offside into a side every time we fight. And I just do that, and I say like, hey man, I kind of don't, you know, I think you would start blocking those if you really got rid of that. You know, people are going to start seeing that. But like, I'm not going to just go up there and tell them that he's required to change that form if that's not what motivates him. Part of what motivates him is the puzzle, the game, the figuring out on his own. Other people just want to blow off steam and fight. You know, other people aren't figuring stuff out. The one thing I've struggled with personally, and maybe if as I get more experience, I'll figure this out, are the people that want karate practice. I say karate. I don't know what school Tristan has. I know he runs a martial arts school, but you know, like a martial arts practice where you pay some money, you have a facility, there's paid teachers, and you've got like today. And again, I've not really done a lot of this, but you know, you might have here's the lesson today, and you can kind of run everyone through a system. And some people really like that. And I don't have the expertise for that. I don't have the time for that. I'm trying to get my own practicing in. Those are the ones I struggle with the most. But at the end of the day, like, I just don't like, some people come in and they're like, I had a local night friend of mine showed up and he was like, oh my God, this guy is doing this thing horribly. It's so wrong. I was like, well, you know, give him a chance. He's doing something else better right now. And that's kind of what we're working on. You know?
Yeah, that's right.
So, all right, that's what I got.
So we're talking about, Your Majesty, we're talking about coaching a little bit here. And I'm sure you have a ton of input there. I want to just cover one more thing just for some folks. There's the mental side of coaching / teaching and the physical. And when we're talking, like, if I'm showing somebody a shot, then we're going to slow it down and we're going to do it. And we're going to point out all the changes that have to be fixed in that thing. And we're going to work on it in a deep space. And you have to keep adjusting so they understand where they're getting to physically. In dynamic sports, like we are as well. So look at the difference. I'm teaching something and then they're going out and executing that thing all the way through. You can't be on the sideline and break up that fight constantly. And I do this sometimes more than I should do, period. So it's something I have to work on. But you don't want to break that fight up and teach them in the middle of it, because there is also in dynamic, they have to learn to do it physically and fail so that they can keep growing. They have to fail over and over and over again. And then you go back to the mental side of it. So just beware that, you know, depending on what you're working on will also depend on when the input comes in. Okay, Simon, all you.
Okay. Oh my goodness. I will try to keep this as brief as possible. Coaching in the SA, as I alluded to earlier, is its own unique animal. You know, we in the SCA we seem to have more than the national average of neurodivergent people, and you know, we seem to draw them. I mean, I'm neurodivergent, and you got a lot of people again that just want to help, but they don't necessarily know how. And so when you're the kind of the coach, the person that's running the thing, you need to develop kind of a thick skin and a soft voice. You know, you need to be able to gently let them know, hey, we're working on a thing. We'll get to you later, or can we talk about this another time? One of the other things that I've also taught my squires, I've told them almost since the beginning to use my name in vain. You know, if they get, you know, once they started getting good, Jose is a great example. Jose is 5'7", chubby, gamer dork. Nobody would imagine, and I've said this to his face, so I'm not telling tales out of school. Nobody would have imagined that guy would become the demon of the bunch and get knighted really quickly and final in a crown really quickly. You would not have looked at him and expected him to be that guy. And he took a very weird path. He wanted to fight Glaive and a bunch of other stuff first. And again, we found good coaches for him. Tom from North Shield. We've got a knight here, Torstein in the Outlands. That's really amazing. My buddy and Barry's buddy from the East, Anton. Actually, he taught Jose at the same practicum of the sword in Starcoffin that I saw Branos at. I think that was the first time I'd ever actually spoken to Branos. And so, but I told them, hey, if we're working on some stuff and you've got 6 knights come up to you and like, you should do this and this and this and this and this, you know, like you can tell them, hey, Simon and I are working on this. My brain is full. This is all I can do right now. Right. So you kind of have to create some boundaries. And then that also kind of creates what I call expectation management. You know, when I first started, and Branos was talking when I came back about, you know, being very precise about practice. You know, you're going to throw so many, you know, wraps or offsides or flat stamps or whatever, and they have to be just right. You know, if you get to, you're going to do 20 and you get to 11 and you have a bad one, you have to go back to 1, right? And at least for my guys. But I told them that from the beginning. That wasn't a surprise. I didn't just come in the middle and say, oh, you got to do a whole bunch more now. You know, that was the process. And then knowing the difference between hard and soft skills. That's a big thing that he talks about in this book that he gets a lot more in depth on. You know, hard skill is throw a flat snap. Throw a flat snap 100 million times. Throw a wrap 100 million times. A soft skill is knowing they're open over here and I want to throw that offside flat stop. Or they're over here and I want to throw this whatever, right? Knowing the difference between hard skills and soft skills and being able to teach them is a big thing. Because the way you cage your brain is different from the two, and you teach them different. And so, you know, I've been very fortunate. You know, when I first started fighting seriously, I had a shoulder injury, had a shoulder surgery, and then all of a sudden I could start fighting heavy. I was not a very good heavy fighter at first. I was a great rapier fighter for 12 years, and I sucked at heavy. And then all of a sudden, hey, my arm works, and I don't suck. And I found, you know, Conrad and Sir Roger here, and then I found Turlock and Dushan in Qaid and Artemisia, and then I found Jarl Thorson and a couple of other people in the East. And you know, because I had all of those great coaches, you know, it gave me a place for me to grow. And Branos, again, you know, I've stolen tons of stuff from Branos. You know, Uther, all those guys. And so as you kind of put those, you know, Legos together and eventually you have something, right? But finding a coach that can help you with those things is tough. And he also talks about how to pick a coach in the book. You know, you don't want somebody that's too nice, you know, because you just don't really accomplish anything, you know. And then all things being equal, you probably want somebody that's older because they've got more experience, you know. So those are all the things that go into coaching and a million more. But you know, this book and the other book are really, really great about kind of explaining how you want to be coached and coach other people. I'll shut up there.
All right. No, that was good. All right, Barry, you had one more little thing.
I was typing that in the comments, but yeah, the really short thing is hard skills versus soft skills. Hard skills are how to throw a flat snap. Soft skills are how to read a fighter, how to you're in the chaos of the melee, you got to make a call in the field. This is stuff you can't. I think in the book they use an example like closing the deal in a sale. Like there's no real specific thing that you can do every time. And
being able to see when the tiny bowl of death is happening.
Yeah, and that gets missed, and we don't have enough time to talk about that. Maybe that could be an episode all of itself. or buy the book and learn about it.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, we're closing in at 9:30. I got a couple of things, just a few other. One is a quote from the book. The lessons a player teaches themselves are more powerful than anything the coach might say. I think the key there is, think more broadly about how you give feedback and, how you talk to the people, because they're the ones learning this. And, you can't force people to learn. They're giving you the gift of listening. So make sure that you're using their time wisely. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces. Also, coming out of this book, and one thing they don't talk about in the book, they make you feel like anybody can do anything. And I've read a ton of different books on the same damn thing, that, hey, if you put your mind to it, you can do it, type of deal. That may be the truth, but remember that we all come in with weaknesses, different strengths and weaknesses. Got bad news. How many 5'6" players get into the NBA? Right? How many? Yeah, one. There we are. How many? Take a look at volleyball. How many offensive people on the front are under 5'6"? Not many, right? Now they may still be in the game in another position, but your center on a team isn't going to be a small person. So just beware. We all have, even though everybody says you can do whatever, but there are limitations. Good part in the SCA is nobody says you can't. and trying hard, to tell you the truth, because we're such a amateur sport or a hobby, trying hard gets you way past sometimes the weaknesses you have. So I think the big piece here is, find yourself somebody, believe in yourself, find yourself somebody to help you, or multiple people to help you, and work hard, and hopefully you get where you want to be. But all right, folks, it's 9:30. Anybody have any last pieces they'd like to say?
I actually would like to tag on to what you just said, Browns.
Okay, go ahead.
When I was out here the first time, the guys that were the top hot sticks are now still the top hot sticks, and we're all in our 50s, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you keep doing these things and putting in the work and working to improve, it's amazing how long you can continue to do this. I started fighting the SCA in 1988. In my 30s, I was like, my window's closing. I was real whiny about it.
Yeah.
I'm 56. I just won my first crown after 37 years in the SCA, and on my seventh try. So if you're following these things and you're doing the work and you're asking for help and you're getting coaches and all of those things that we've talked about today, you'd be surprised how long you can hang around at a pretty solid level.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a whole nother conversation, and maybe I'll write it down. But we talked a little about it last episode, and that was, it's been interesting to see. And I apologize for anybody that's heavy, but back in the day, it was, if many times it was, the common joke was like, oh, he's a duke, he's heavy, so he's a duke, or that scenario. And back in the day, that was, they could be. I mean, they could hold, you were heavier, and this is a real thing. You're heavier, you're bigger, you could stand in the middle and just pound away, and you didn't have to worry about kinetic chain, and you didn't have to worry about many of those things. But if you look nowadays at how many young kings or even older kings that are dukes, they're in great shape. I think His Majesty hit a point where it's like, it's not all about just the hours on the field, but also the learning, education, and really being in good shape. So, all right, you got me. Stop talking. Go ahead.
Yeah. So quick note on that: you can be 5'2", 120 pounds, and if you're put in the work, I mean, it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, But if you put in the work, you do what you need to do, you keep your body healthy, you dedicate yourself to it, you can do this 100%. I know you can because I'm doing it. So shout out to all my shorties out there and small fighters. We got this. Number 2, buy the book. Just go buy it, read it the whole way through. It doesn't matter if you're new, if you've been around a long time, if you think you know everything, go buy this book, read it. It's going to really help and hone in some of the things that perhaps you need to think about or work on. I can't talk highly enough about this book. It's fantastic.
All right. All right, Simon, you're going to wrap her up for us.
Super quick. For the shorties, Antigone, this weekend, I knighted Sir Christine. Sir Christine is 5'4". She has been fighting since the early 90s. She is tiny and female, and she's an absolute demon on spear. And she just kept doing it and working her butt off. And you know, she's saved my ass more times than I can count at wars. So you know, you can do it. And she is tiny, and she's now a knight.
Awesome. All right, so I promise everybody before we're going to try to make sure we have an episode in 2 weeks. I have a couple episodes posted up to the group to see which ones they would like to have. Simon, you are welcome back anytime. And if you have an episode that you're interested in doing, let me know and we'll put it together. For everyone else, thank you for coming on the show and helping this out. We really want to keep this going for everyone, and I hope everyone's getting something out of it. For those who are posting online or just listening, thanks for coming out again and listening to our show. I know it's time. Hopefully you're learning something. Hopefully it's motivating you. Hopefully is ticking that mark of being smarter about, you know, what you're doing out there. This is just as much part of the game as that physical piece of getting out on the field. So thanks for the great conversation online. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. And everybody have a safe 2 weeks. Hopefully everybody has a wonderful Halloween time area. So, and look forward to seeing you.
Thanks.
Bye,
Love
guys.
y'all.
Thanks, everybody.